pretty much Palmetto Bay. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
So I get to introduce you, Councilwoman. I'm going to introduce somebody that doesn't need any introduction. But Councilwoman Mattson, I don't have your bio in front of me. Can I just wing it? An amazing friend, an amazing colleague on council. She's been active through many, many years, why I thought when we were looking at the curriculum, I said, if anybody knows the history of the village of Palmetto Bay and the incorporation of the village, it's going to be Councilwoman Mattson. I know she told you a little bit about herself, but let's give her a warm welcome. Didn't do it justice. I'm sorry. It was a surprise introduction.
Thank you. Hello again, everybody. And welcome, everybody. I saw new people today and learned about you, and I'm so happy that you're here in Palmetto Bay. I've lived in Palmetto Bay for 30 years, raised my children here. They went to Coral Reef, Southwood, Palmetto High School. Now they're grown up, thank goodness, and very successful. So yeah, Palmetto Bay, the school's terrific, parks wonderful, and the trees, definitely. So the history of Palmetto Bay Incorporation. Let me just give you a really brief history. I had a good time reminiscing with some people that we all went through this together. It took 7 years to incorporate. And I was talking to one of the main incorporation advocates, Bev Gerald, last night. We were thinking of names and what we had done and so on. And she said, well, why couldn't we incorporate back in August of 1995? And she said, but we had no idea what we were in for. So it took 7 years to do this, and it was a big struggle. Why did we want to incorporate? Well, Pinecrest next door incorporated, along with Key Biscayne and Aventura. And so we thought, well, why can't we? We should do it too. We can have control over our zoning, and control over our police department, and control over other functions of municipal government. So we were all in favor of this. Now, personally, I wanted to incorporate because my house was destroyed by Hurricane Andrew, and I just saw a very dysfunctional government, county government. And teaching government as I did, I just really wanted to try our own municipal government and see if we could do it better. And we definitely have, as far as I'm concerned. So, incorporation here started in Chuck and Donna's living room, in Chuck and Donna Latshaw, who live in Manglewood. Now, other people have taken credit for that, but I know for a fact it started in Chuck and Donna's living room. About 25 to 30 people have worked in the village for 7 long years, from 1995 to 2002, to incorporate. The first community-wide meeting was at St. Andrew's Church. And at that time, a Palmetto Bay Steering Committee was formed. There were weekly meetings in Ed Ludovici's office. He had a law office here in town. And fortunately, he had a conference room where we talked about what we were going to do and our plans and so on. And people donated money. They donated their time, their energy. And there was a big community meeting at what is now Christ Fellowship. About 1,000 people came. It filled up the room. We took a straw poll. The question was, should we incorporate, yes or no? And it was 80% yes. So we knew we were on the right track with incorporation. Now, what were some of the obstacles along the way? And there were many. Well, first of all, the county adamantly opposed our incorporation. They had seen Pinecrest, Aventura, and Key Biscayne incorporate, and then they saw the movement for more communities to want to incorporate. They didn't want more communities pulling out of the county, out of what is called the unincorporated area, or UMSA. So it became a hot topic because they were in such fierce opposition. Our county commissioner at the time, Katie Sorensen, she also was opposed to it, as were most of the county commissioners, except for one, Jimmy Morales, who was an ally. The main county argument against our incorporation was rich people are taking their tax money out of the county, out of the unincorporated area, and leaving behind poor people. Now, this was what we would call today fake or misinformation, because one of the communities that wanted to incorporate at the same time was Miami Lakes, which is in North Miami-Dade County. A poor community, but it wanted to have good government too. And so the county would maintain this argument, but it wasn't a true argument because Miami Lakes wanted to incorporate. Another argument in opposition to our incorporation was that the new cities would raise property taxes. And what's happened with that is that the new cities typically have stayed very low in property taxes, including Palmetto Bay. We just had our budget. We just passed our budget the other day, and we are still one of the lowest millage taxes in the county. So depending on the commercial and the residential tax base, most of the cities kept a very low tax rate. The Miami Herald was opposed, and it kept writing editorials about how we were depriving poor people of our tax money. And in fact, there were articles written by reporters which always threw in the rich versus poor argument. And I remember talking to a reporter one time saying, "Do you believe that the moon has green cheese? It's made of green cheese," because that is the argument. It's not a true argument. So the Herald had been a big supporter of the Home Rule Charter of Miami-Dade County, which gives the county enormous powers over the communities in Palmetto Bay, in the county, and they did not want to give that power. Okay, another obstacle was Kings Bay, and some of you may know that that's a community now in Coral Gables. Kings Bay did not want to join Palmetto Bay, and it had enough clout, enough power at the county commission that we were told that if Kings Bay was not allowed to go with Coral Gables, then we wouldn't have an incorporation. So the steering committee ultimately said, yes, Kings Bay, go where you want. But that's why Kings Bay, which is on the shore, it really is very close. It's right next to Palmetto Bay, but it is part of Coral Gables. So that was one of the obstacles that we overcame. In 1997 through 1998, the steering committee sued the county to let us go. And we won a wonderful victory in circuit court, but then the county appealed and we lost in the third DCA, Third District Court of Appeals. In 1998, an attorney by the name of Gene Stearns became our pro bono attorney. And he filed a federal lawsuit that the three cities, Doral, Palmetto Bay, and Miami Lakes, were being deprived of their civil rights under the 14th Amendment. Now, that was a glorious day hearing the arguments in federal court, but we lost. Gene Stearns once told me that it cost his law firm $1 million to pursue that case for the three cities. So he's our hero. Okay, another obstacle was community councils. And the county devised this idea. It was, I think, a brainchild of Miguel de la Portilla. And he came up with this idea that each of these communities in unincorporated could have their own zoning board and also at the same time every other month have a community meeting. So Palmetto Bay became lucky number 13, Community Council 13. And it was the first level of zoning, so we did have some limited control over zoning, but of course if the applicant did not like our decision, it was appealed to the county commission. So we did have some control, but not very much. What was great about Lucky 13 was that those every other month community meetings, we made all about incorporation. So it continued, it kept alive, the whole movement. Those community councils were actually very important to keep the initiative going. Another thing that happened was one of our residents, Bev Gerald, and people from Doral and other communities formed an umbrella organization called LINC, Let's Incorporate Now Coalition, which exists to this day because as we are here today, Biscayne Gardens is having an early vote on whether they're going to become a city. So Biscayne Gardens, this is how many years now Biscayne Gardens has been working on it, and next Tuesday they will know whether they will be a city. So the link, Let's Incorporate Now Coalition, included Palmetto Bay, Doral, Miami Lakes, Cutler Bay, Westchester, West Kendall, and Miami Gardens. And later, High Pines, The Falls, and Biscayne Gardens came in. So Link met monthly, and it was vital in keeping everybody together throughout the unincorporated area who wanted to become a city. Now, some communities didn't, but several did. So we made, through Link, a professional video of 10 hour-long discussions about the advantages of incorporation, and we persuaded, at that time, cable TV to play these discussions for weeks on end throughout the county. Our motto was local government close to the people, and activists from all the areas that wanted to incorporate were involved. So that was a lot of fun to do, being on TV and having people say, hey, I saw you on TV talking about incorporation, just to keep the idea going. So the pressure became intense on the county. Now, 3 areas were at the front of the line, and those were Palmetto Bay, Doral, and Miami Lakes. So the county decided to negotiate with Miami Lakes to require new cities to buy their way out of unincorporated. Miami Lakes negotiated first and submitted to the county's demand, in which new cities were required to pay millions of dollars in order to become their own cities. Also, to take county police for 4 years, to take county fire, and to take county library permanently. So we had no choice in terms of becoming a city. We had to conform to these demands. Now, the state legislature at this point got involved. We contacted our state legislators, and the county got worried because the state was talking about revising the home rule charter so that the state would determine who could become a city instead of the county, because the county was making it so difficult for cities to incorporate. At that point, the county set a time limit of 7 years of payment of what I called ransom. Mitigation is what the formal word was. And then it would end. So Palmetto Bay and Miami Lakes each individually paid the county $10 million in order to become a city. Doral, being bigger, more populous, eventually paid $54 million to the county to become a city. So finally, in 2002, after 7 years of constant struggle, Palmetto Bay agreed to the Miami Lakes model, and Palmetto Bay had a village-wide vote in which 83% of our voters voted to incorporate. So people really did want to become a city. A charter writing committee was appointed, and the members produced the charter, which is our village constitution, and it was passed. The charter establishes a strong manager, weak council system, which you will hear all about in your Citizens Academy. And the council is elected by the people and sets policy, whereas the manager runs the day-to-day operations of the village. We also voted at the same time to name the village Palmetto Bay. There was another name on the ballot, and it was Cutler. I personally favored Cutler because that is the second historic town, second oldest town in Miami-Dade, South Miami-Dade County, which is now the ruins that are located in Daring Estate. But the voters preferred Palmetto Bay, so that's what we are, the village of Palmetto Bay. So in summing up, I would like to name the individuals who made this village, and they all deserve credit for fighting so hard, contributing so much effort, time, and money over the years to become who we are today, the village of Palmetto Bay. So you might recognize some of these names. You might know some of these people. Chuck and Donna Latshaw, Ed and Susan Ludovici, Paula and David Palm, Bev and Harvey Gerald, Julie and Al Lavoie, Warren and Helen Lovely, Gabe and Jean Bufano, Ed and Arlene Feller. Ed became a founding council member in our first election. Linda and Ken Robinson. Linda became founding vice mayor, and you may have noticed the meditation garden in Coral Reef Park is named for Ken Robinson. Gene Flynn, he became the founding mayor. He was the chair of the steering committee. Brian Pariser became vice mayor. Paul Blake, Bob Harrison, Paul Neidhart, he became a council member. John Breeder, he became a council member. Shelley Stancic, she became a council member and the mayor. Gary Pastorella, who writes a community newsletter. Tom David, and myself, Marcia Matson, council member today. So that's a short history, and I just wanted to point out before I give up the mic that you were given this booklet. This booklet came about as a result of the 15th anniversary of the village. And my neighbor, Sheila Frazier, and I have a great neighbor. She's my back fence neighbor. We talk over the back fence. She's a history buff. She was on the committee. And together we wrote and took the photographs for this. So this is a history of Palmetto Bay. There's a little bit about Incorporation in it, but it's mostly older history of Palmetto Bay. And then the village was able to get a grant from the state of Florida to organize a tour, historic tour based on this booklet. So there is a video, which I believe is now out, right? There's a video describing different places through video, and also a booklet if you want to take a tour of places in Palmetto Bay. There are little signs currently that you can put your phone up to, and it will tell you the story of Palmetto Bay. So that's about it. That's my history thing tonight, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Madsen. Communications, can you put up the brief? So as they're doing that, tonight, I'm going to keep the brief here under 10 minutes. I do want to respect your time. I know everyone has a busy schedule here. We are going to go just a little bit over tonight. So if we can get the brief up here. I'm going to go through Local Government 101. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go through Local Government 101. I'm going to introduce a number of not only the departments of Palmetto Bay, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how the village functions. We're going to get into much more detail as we go into each individual month. We're going to break it down into quite a bit more detail. So let's start with, what is a city government? Well, in the state of Florida, there's no difference, frankly, between a town, a village, a city. They're all the same thing. They're all municipalities. And more specifically, they're municipal corporations. And who are the shareholders of the corporation? Well, the citizens. I mean, more accurately, the voters of that community are the shareholders in the municipal corporation. So everyone in this room who's a resident and a voter in Palmetto Bay is vested and is a member of that municipal corporation. So what does the city do? If you look at the bottom, you see each one of the departments that have a public facing function populated. So if you look at building and permitting, public safety, parks and recreation, public works. Public works are the streets, the storm drains, the street lights, the sidewalks, all the public infrastructure that we use on a daily basis in a village. Planning and zoning, and finally elections. These are the functions that a municipality in the state performs. We're, again, as we go through the class here over the next 9 to 10 months, we're going to go into more detail on each one of these functions. I want to introduce it to you here this evening. But again, this is the business of what a city actually does. These are the functions that the public sees. So just like the federal government, the village has a constitution. It's our village charter. I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. And the village passes laws. We call them ordinances, but an ordinance is a law. So the village has a constitution. The village council having all the legislative authority vested in them, from time to time passes new laws, passes new ordinances. And I'll talk about that process as well in a moment. So let's talk about the charter. I also have the scrolls of the Torah up here in case you need to refer to those. But what's contained in the Village of Palmetto Bay's charter? Well, a number of very important aspects are in there. You've got the Citizens' Bill of Rights. You've got not only the corporate boundaries of the village, but also the boundaries of each seat for each member of the village council. The duties of the mayor, the vice mayor, the village council, the charter officers, and again, the three charter officers are the attorney, the clerk, and the manager. The legislative process is also described in detail. Again, how the village council performs its legislative function in terms of meetings, ordinances, how the village conducts budget hearings, how the village has to pass a budget. All of that information, again, is contained in our Constitution, which is the village charter. Elections, again, are covered in there. And something that's fairly unique to Palmetto Bay, there's a separate section on neighborhood protection. That was a very important aspect of why the village actually incorporated, was to protect the single family neighborhood structure and neighborhood feel that many of you have described as this is why you moved to Palmetto Bay. You moved here because of the vibe that it gave. The trees, the parks, the feeling of being in a neighborhood. And unlike a lot of cities, it's written into our charter, that neighborhood protection clause. And the village, as you'll see later on in the brief here, actually has a neighborhood protection committee that meets and makes recommendations to the council. And believe it or not, the council then takes those recommendations from the neighborhood protection committee and does what with it? Well, they pass laws, they pass ordinances that codify those citizen recommendations that come from the neighborhood protection committee. And we'll go into more detail throughout the year on it. Dr. Madsen brought up the council manager form of government. That's what we have here. It may or may not be something that is intuitive, but it's actually a very common form of government at the local level in the United States. In fact, a vast majority of the cities and towns across the country and in the state of Florida have this form of government. So how does it work? Well, the voters elect the mayor and the council. And if you kind of look at it as kind of the federal government, if you're familiar with the three branches of the federal government, you've got the legislative, which is the Congress, you have the executive, which is the president, and the judicial, which are the courts. It's really a similar way in a council manager form of government. The voters elect the mayor and council. They have all the legislative authority that's vested in them. They approve the budget. They provide oversight. But the mayor and the council appoint the manager, they appoint the clerk, and they appoint the attorney, the three charter officers. The manager is then tasked with supervising the departments that actually conduct the daily business of the village. So on a daily basis, it's the manager, it's the charter officers who actually run the village, and they report on a monthly basis to the council and to the mayor. So again, very briefly, that's the council manager form of government. So then what are the duties of the mayor and the vice mayor? Well, this is taken directly out of our charter, and you can see it if you flip to it in your brief. But again, the mayor is also kind of unique among the council members in that she is also vested with a number of executive functions. And most importantly, and we saw it actually during COVID, even though it says the mayor shall be recognized as the head of village government for all ceremonial purposes, for purposes of military law, and for service of process. Well, we didn't have military law, but we had a emergency ordinance that was in effect during certainly during much of the COVID pandemic, and the mayor has very specific authority granted to her. So the mayor is a little unique from the rest of the council in that she also has executive functions contained within her job as specified in the charter. The vice mayor has the same exact slate of responsibilities and authorities as the mayor. She is just there to perform those duties in the mayor's absence. So the mayor, the vice mayor have the same set of duties and responsibilities as laid out in the charter. So what about the other three council members? Well, this map shows you the three districts that make up the Village of Palmetto Bay's Village Council. District 1 goes from the boundary with Pinecrest down to, you can see as it goes down to 152nd Street. Seat 2 is in the center, goes from 152nd down to 168th. And then finally, seat 3 goes from 168th down to the boundary with Cutler Bay at 184th. So what about the council? What are their responsibilities? Well, the council are the elected representatives of the people, and they are there to represent the interests of their constituents first and foremost. And you see them do that not only on a daily basis, but you see them in a public meeting. The council is there to represent the voters. The council also provides a vision. They provide policy. They also perform general oversight of the government. They adopt the budget. They appoint all the charter officers, and they serve on other boards and committees and commissions as is appropriate. The village manager, again, I'm going to kind of run through this just so I can kind of catch up on time here. But the village manager on a daily basis runs the village departments, and you can see the duties that are assigned to the village manager by the charter. At the bottom of the slide, I've put in a organization chart that shows the departments of the village. And again, if you kind of look at it like the federal government with with the council being the legislative branch, the manager is the executive branch. So Congress creates the Department of Defense, but the president is the one who actually on a daily basis is the commander in chief and runs the Department of Defense. If that makes sense, I think it's an easy way for you to visualize how village government actually works. So on a monthly basis, what do we do? Well, among other things, the village has a number of important public meetings, starting with the regular council meetings, which take place on the first Monday of every month. And in that council meeting, that is where not only the policies are adopted, that's where the laws or the ordinance are heard and adopted. That's where the budget is approved. That's where the charter officers provide monthly reports. That's where the various committees and boards provide their reports. And finally, that's where important public comment is taken in the form of public hearings. So first and foremost, we have our regular council meetings. We have planning and zoning meetings that also take place on a monthly basis, and they generally are the third week of the month. So things, very important decisions get made here, things like site plan approvals, zoning changes, our comprehensive plan, our future land use map. You'll hear all about these later on in the class, but very important decisions get made during planning and zoning that affect how we live in the village. Oops. The village council also conducts a public committee of the whole meeting. That kind of sounds like a very odd name. And all that is a public meeting where the village council talks about different items that may come up. They can't vote on any items for action, but they can talk about it. I'm going to get into at the very end the Florida Sunshine Law, and the Florida Sunshine Law basically requires any public deliberation between two or more members of a public body on an issue that may come in front of them, that has to be conducted in public. So that's the purpose of the committee of the whole meeting. Finally, we have various committees and boards and task forces that meet. Some meet on a monthly basis, some are bi-monthly, and some are quarterly. And we'll get into that as well. Okay, so if you remember back from a Saturday morning cartoon being just a bill up on Capitol Hill, right? How does a bill become a law? Or in this case, how does an idea become an ordinance? How does an idea become a law? So who can have the idea? Well, anyone, frankly. And I've only been here 1 year, and I've seen a number of individual residents who have come forward in public comment or in an email or in a phone call, and they've had an idea, and that idea was later, was subsequently adopted as an ordinance or as a law. An elected official can propose it. It can come from the staff here. Many of the members seated here in the first row provide recommendations for new ordinances or for modification of existing ordinances. And finally, other governments can take action that then require the village to adopt. The federal government or the state government can adopt a law or a statute that would then require the village to adopt a new ordinance. So very often the next step, it then goes to one of those specialized committees, or the staff themselves will work it. They'll do detailed research. We'll coordinate with the attorney. We may have to coordinate with outside attorneys if it's something that requires some type of specialized analysis. We'll do public outreach. We'll coordinate among the other members of the staff, and we may need to coordinate with Miami-Dade County. We may need to coordinate with other governmental entities in order to get this ordinance ready to be heard. So that's step 2. Step 3, it goes to council. Council actually has to conduct at least 2 public hearings. 2 public hearings. So if we bring an ordinance in November for the first one, council will hear it. The mayor will gavel a public hearing open. Members of the public are free to come up either in person. They can do it by video, or they can do it by form. They can provide their input. Once the public hearing is closed, the council then debates it, and they may be ready to vote. They may want to send it back either to staff or the committee for additional work, and then it may come back to them. But again, that process has to happen for at least 2 times, 2 consecutive, or it doesn't have to be consecutive months, but it has to be read and voted on twice before that ordinance can actually be adopted and become a law. So what are the boards, committees, and task force that I've talked about? Well, here they are. We've got Art and Public Places. We have the Charter Revision Commission. We have the Economic Task Force, the Education Advisory Board, the Heritage Committee, which is active this year in recognition of our 20th anniversary as a village. So we've got, that's a special advisory committee that is active this year. We've got the Neighborhood Protection Committee, Parks and Rec, the Tree Advisory Board, the Veterans Park Task Force, and finally, the Youth Community Involvement Task Force. So I'm going to end up with and ask the attorney, John Della Gloria, if he wouldn't mind. I know he's going to talk more about it next month. I've got the highlights of the Florida Sunshine Law up here. John, would you mind, or you want me to do it? Okay, let me run through it real quick in the interest of time. But again, I kind of I kind of teased it out a little bit earlier, but the Florida Sunshine Law is designed so that the residents of the state have access to the meetings and records of their government. Okay? So everything that we do and everything that we talk about, whether that's in an email, whether that's in a public meeting, has to be available. The recording, the minutes, the emails, the documents, they all have to be available for public inspection according to the Sunshine Law. It's a very broad law. It applies to all the boards and committees of the village. The, the public records request is one of the more frequent requests we get here at the village. And finally, the Sunshine Law requires all the boards and committees and commissions to meet in public. We have to provide notice. And again, we'll go into more detail in the Sunshine Law next month. I just want to introduce that along with everything else here in the 101 brief. So with that, we're about 15 minutes over, and I will be happy to open it up to any questions either about this or anything else that you may have.
Differ from a committee, and are they subject to the Sunshine Law as well?
John, use it so that the people that are online can hear you. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. To answer the question, okay. There are some boards and committees, as the manager has said, that are created under our charter. Any board and committee has to meet in the sunshine. And again, as we will be talking about next time, we'll talk about some of the niceties of that. Task forces are created by the manager under our charter. But in fact, this issue came up maybe 6 months ago when the city was always under the impression that a task force did not have to meet in the sunshine. It depends. Lawyers love to say it depends. It depends. Okay? And what it depends on is whether the task force is merely assembling information to give to the manager, such as, let's say the manager wants to know what the average salary should be for a public works director here in Miami-Dade County. They then gather that information and hand it off to the manager. However, if a task force is making a recommendation, then that task force must meet in the sunshine. It doesn't matter whether the recommendation is even communicated. It doesn't matter if the manager takes the recommendation up. So a task force is created by the manager, committees are created by council and charter, but depending on the function of the task force, sometimes it has to meet in the sunshine, sometimes not. Boards and committees always have to do that.
Any other questions?
Just a quick clarification on that. Is that outlined in the charter? Clarification was, is it outlined specifically in charter or is that just process?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay. The answer is state law requires the sunshine meetings and state law requires the Public Records Act. The manager mentioned both. Those are two separate laws, which we will again go into in detail. Did that answer your? Okay. Okay. This is the live. Let's see. Okay. Unless it's a legal question.
My question was, I guess for the charter and the ordinances, they are online, are they accessible by the public?
They are. So if you go, you can go to the village website. If you go to government, which is one of the main tabs up top, you can go down. The charter is a separate category. You can click that on. Ordinances are also there. You can click them on. It'll take you to a page that's called Unicode. That's a contractor we use that basically digitizes our code of ordinances and our charter. But what's important for you to know about that is you can search by keyword, right? So if you're putting a fence in and you want to know what the requirements are in the code for a fence, you can type in fence into Unicode and it'll bring up, for example, all the relevant items. So, but again, that's all accessible directly off of our homepage under government.
And does the charter ever change?
The charter does change, and there's a provision for changing the charter. That's one of the main purposes of the Charter Revision Committee. Any change, because again, now we're back to who are the shareholders in the municipal corporation? It's you, it's the voters. Any changes are approved by the voters. And this past election, we had, I forget, I think 5, was it 5, Madam Mayor? I think. How many were approved? How many were adopted, though? I thought it was 5 were adopted. But there were a number that were approved by the voters at the last election.
So that's, okay, so during the election, those questions that are asked on the ballot would
People
be
vote.
changes on the charter, but not
Correct.
an ordinance? Or
Yeah,
possibly?
you see, and that's why, again, the charter is our constitution. So the people are going to approve, the voters are going to approve changes to that. An ordinance is a lower level, it's a law, but that's under the authority of the council to change those. Obviously, I'm getting over my head in law here.
Sorry, guys.
So, don't make me stand. Okay, as the manager indicated, last year we put, I believe, 6 questions on the ballot, and I believe 4 of them passed. Okay, when those 4 passed, it's in the charter now, or will be, okay, so it's in the charter, but then the council takes that and converts it into an ordinance, not in each and every case, but the charter amendments can also become ordinances of the city, if that makes sense. Got it.
Last question. And how does it work with the different positions in terms of whether they're full-time, part-time? Seems like people have other jobs. Are they volunteer, salaried? Like, I don't know, like the structure.
So as part of the budget, we submit by department the personnel. The council approves the personnel, the full-time and part-time positions for each department. So on an annual basis, as part of the budget approval process, the people get approved as well. That again, you know, the public.
I'm talking about council members mostly, and those, the big people up there. Are they like volunteer versus salary full time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, the council members receive compensation for their work. So the mayor makes $24,000 a year, and each individual council member makes $12,000 a year. There are some cities, like our sister city, next door neighbor city is what I mean, Pinecrest, where nobody makes a salary. We also can potentially receive benefits, like my health insurance comes through the village. So you're correct. I think all of my colleagues, with the exception of one, work outside doing this, representing the city.
You mean
Have full-time or part-time employment.
somewhere else?
Yes, a regular job, just like everybody here. We all have regular jobs, and then we also serve the city. Okay, I'm going to pass it off again.
My understanding is then, since we are not going to make recommendations, that the Citizens Academy is not under the sunshine. Is that correct? Thank you.
In terms of the boards and committees, so two-part question. Sorry again. So I'll try to beat your time here. How do the residents of the community do they sign up for these committees and boards, or are they selected? How do they go about doing that? That's like my first part of the question.
I can answer. So as the village attorney explained, a committee and a board, those report to the council. And how are they formed? Council members individually form these committees with a vision or mission, and those are formed by ordinance. The way our code of ordinances read is when you are appointed by an advisory board or committee, you are appointed individually by one representative, the mayor, the vice mayor, and one of the three council members. So that's how you are appointed to one of the committees that you saw on slide number 13 of your presentation.
And so are there particular like requirements to join, and is there like a limit to the membership of all of these committees that are there?
To answer that question, yes. So if you look at the tree advisory board, and I will use that one as the example because I heard trees a lot this evening. The tree advisory board has as well as I mentioned, a mission. The requirements for that tree board, yes, you do have to be an urban landscaper. You do have to, I don't know them all by memory, but if you want to look it up, it's on Unicode, www.unicode.com. You will select F for the state of Florida, and then you just select the municipality, and it will lead you to Palmetto Bay. There's a search bar when you get to the Palmetto Bay page under Unicode that allows you to enter any keyword. When you type up the keyword, a search engine will come up, and you'll be able to read exactly verbatim how the code reads. So in conclusion, the majority of our advisory boards, as again listed on page 13, do have a specific scope or mission. Some of them are unique. For example, the Heritage Committee. That was the most recent adopted committee by ordinance. It also did go through 2 readings. The council is in the process of their selections. I believe there are two council members that are still recruiting. And why do I say that one is unique? Because that mission is to celebrate the 20th year anniversary celebration of the village. So when the mission is completed, then that committee or board sunsets. And then, at any time, a council member can create a new committee or a board if it passes 2 readings. Now, the task force, as the village attorney said, those have their own parameters.
So as a resident, I can be able to come and propose a committee, or no, that's only done through the council?
That's an idea. So definitely, you can definitely express your desire and your idea, and you can do it in several ways. And the village attorney is here, the manager is here, and if I miss something, please chime in. You can, one of many ways, you can come to a public meeting and express that idea during public comments, and perhaps one of the council members will pick up that idea and said, "Oh, that's a wonderful idea." And they'll connect with you, and then they'll bring it in a form of legislation, which is an ordinance. And we can use the Citizens Academy as an example. That's an idea that the mayor and I spoke about. She ran with it, and we created legislation, and we are here. So that's a prime example. Another way is you can, depending on your district or where you live, you can reach out to your representative. The manager also in his presentation provided a district map, and you can connect with the representative where you reside. That's one of those are just two ways. But there's other ways around that too.
Gotcha. And then just to clarify, sorry, I know probably are past our bedtimes here, but so once you go in through that committee process, you do have to have specific. So as an example, with the tree thing, right?
Yeah.
The advisory group, you would have to have specifically, not if you're just a regular Joe Schmo, you have a love for trees, you can't go ahead and necessarily be a part of that.
No, you're not excluded. Definitely not. You can still participate in the meetings just as a member of the public. You can actually attend those meetings. They happen typically on the last Monday of every month. All of our committee and advisory board meetings, including our task forces, are virtual. All of our public meetings are listed on our village website, and you can sign up to register to speak. So you don't have to be an actual member to participate. You can go and express your concerns to the committee. So let's say the tree advisory board, they have a meeting at the last Monday of the month, and they're speaking on a tree plan. And you want to bring ideas on how they do the tree plan. You can make those recommendations at the meeting. Then the council liaison, in this case, Council Member Marsha Matson is the liaison. She will bring those recommendations that are discussed at the meeting to a council meeting, and that's when the council members actually decide whether or not they want to approve those recommendations. And they approve recommendations by legislation. It has to be an actual document.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Did I answer correctly? Okay. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor, do you want to?
Okay.
Yeah, I think this has been really awesome. I'm so glad you guys are here. As I said before, we're all available. You have our contact information. You may get home, start looking through your book, think of other things. I love the dialogue about committees. And as the clerk also mentioned, each one of those committees or task forces, when they're meeting, they have agendas. So it's all on it's all on the web. You can click on the date, look at the agenda, find out what they're going to be talking about. Come join us virtually for those meetings, or join us. We've had some new faces coming out to the meetings. We have our next council meeting is on Monday, November 1st. We begin with recognitions at 6:30 p.m. Meetings usually start pretty close to 7 p.m. Other things that are coming up, well, there's lots of events happening in the community. We also have our State of the Village on November 18th. We're going to be recognizing quite a few amazing residents here in the village of Palmetto Bay. And you'll also see a video and maybe meet some new friends. So that's on November 18th. It is RSVP only because we're trying to keep it to the 150 kind of outdoor, but following some CDC protocol. All that information, you can reach out to any one of us to get it. And I want to thank the staff for sticking around for so long this evening. Thank our commander and our lieutenant and our charter officers. We're very appreciative. Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, good job, everyone.